There we go. All right, everybody. So, welcome to Scotch Money, where we talk about money while drinking scotch. Cheers! Aha! We love it. Mm. Mm-mm-mm. So, my name is Dmitry Chabatarov, and I have with me Brian Arandez and Hunter Slay. Say hi, boys.
Hey,
How's it going?
So good. All right. Today we're going to be talking about marijuana drugs. What are they? What 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 does it mean to our country politically? Maybe what does it mean on the investment side, since that's usually what we end up talking about. And then maybe if everyone's good at the end, I'll play the Scotch Money song on the piano over here. All right, guys. So let's start this off with a little bit of, we'll do it back and forth like we always do. Hunter, what do you think about marijuana? Let's before we jump into the investment side, what do you think about it on the personal side? Do you think it's, the devil's lettuce?
I think on the personal side, uh, I can only speak for America because I've never lived in other countries. I've only visited. But I think in America, the way we live life, our capitalistic society, our democratic republic, I think it just lends itself to stresses. Whether it's building our own company, figuring out problems, like coming up with new solutions, pushing ahead, for culture in America, I feel has an organic amount of stress just inherent,
You're
and
lagging a
people
little
have.
bit, Hunter.
I don't know what I should do as a result of that.
Okay, you're better now. Sorry about that.
So yeah, I just feel like it comes with an inherent amount of stress, and people are going to lose stress one way or the other. A lot of people use alcohol, and I feel like a lot of people use cigarettes. I feel like weed is just another one of those, vices in that category. It's how you use it. It's why you use it. It's one of those things. Too much is never good at anything. You know, in moderation applies. Like I feel like it should be people's choice though, whether they partake in it. Just like alcohol, unless you have it's separately classified, so to speak. So I feel like it has a place whether it's legal or not, just based on how our society functions.
Okay. All right, Brian, what do you think?
um, I'm an outsider in this country. I've only been here for 8 years.
Burn him in a wicker man.
But from the outside looking in, uh, it's an interesting culture. I think I see a lot of people using it to self-medicate. Uh, the the medicine here seems to be very opioid heavy, which I find unusual. I've lived in Japan and the Philippines, and healthcare there is different. Healthcare here is very interesting in how the insurance plays a lot into it and how much things cost. Uh, Even a simple emergency room visit. I've I've visited the emergency room a bunch of times while my wife is since my wife is pregnant, and each visit is ridiculously expensive for something that is practically free when we were visiting the emergency room in Japan. So it's alien to me, and I'm just new to this. But I assume that these costs associate and plus all of the terrible news about people dying from the opioids just force people to self-medicate and find solutions on their own and find and hear things from their peers.
Mhm.
So I'm assuming that's why uh, the drug has just become very very popular. Um,
Gotcha. Okay.
and correct me if I'm wrong, but isn't this like the first country that tried to ban marijuana in the first place?
It is. Uh, so I want to say it was in the early 20th century. Um, so I lost Hunter on my screen.
So did
Uh,
I.
well, so in any case,
You guys keep
We'll see him
looking,
again.
but I'm hearing everything.
it's okay. We'll truck on through this. So uh, we can talk about the history of marijuana if you guys want. Let me throw in my 2 cents on the drug itself. It is a drug, at least in my opinion. Well, not just in my opinion, but in I think most people's opinion. It's a mind altering substance. And does it have any medicinal benefit? I don't know, really. It's something that uh, can have benefit, I'm sure, just like anything else. I mean, drinking a little bit of scotch isn't going to hurt you. Um, as long as you don't drink too much, right? So that being said, um, in regards to people self-medicating, I agree. I think people self-medicate a lot in this country, even to a small degree. I mean, like when I was growing up, I technically am a foreigner, though I grew up, here in America since I was 3 years old. Um, and the way my family was when we were kids, we didn't take medicines. We took one medicine, and it was like an antibacterial type of thing called propolis, um, when we were sick. But it didn't like take away all your symptoms. You had to go through the symptoms, right? That's part of being sick. And then now as an adult, uh, just looking through things, I see, a whole world of medicines that you can use to completely mask all the symptoms of being sick. And I mean, first of all, that's cool, but my first thought is, all right, what happens if you use that every single time? Your body has to be able to experience those symptoms. There's probably some sort of benefit to it. But in terms of marijuana specifically, uh, you know, as a younger man than I am today, I have used it. I don't really use it now. Um, I just don't have the time for it. And also it makes me really foggy. And I like to be sharp. I like to be focused on what needs to get done. I know a lot of really successful people that do use it. More power to them. And yeah, so that's really what I'd say about it from a personal perspective. Um,
On that light, with marijuana making you foggy, wouldn't that also, because just combining what you're saying about that and what Hunter's saying about stress, uh, I mean, one of the things about society here that I'm seeing is that people look at sleep as something to be avoided. You're not productive when you're asleep. You're not getting things done and making money while you're asleep. But a lot of the things that your body does when it heals happens when you're sleeping.
oh,
Um, and I think one of my friends, he uses marijuana a lot. At least he used to. He completely stopped. But one of the things that he was using it for is to get a lot of deep sleep in, just because of the health benefits of deep sleep. Um, when I remember a story where he would he was very sick, had a very high fever, so he prepared himself a lot of brownies, just left it beside his bed. So when he woke up, he took another one and fell back asleep. You
oh
know,
God.
he just kept himself sedated. And I don't know if it's the marijuana that actually helped her to sleep, but it's it's technically a symptom of the way this society works.
I agree. And I want to give Hunter a chance to talk, even though I see his webcam kind of going in and out on this one. Um, the one thing I will say is this: yes, and I mean, look, if you get all couch locked and you eat enough of a sedative, and marijuana is for the most part a sedative, right? You're gonna you're gonna pass out. My question is, and I feel like there's not enough scientific research that's been done on this topic, but I know this. when I get all wasted on the booze, which I don't do very frequently anymore, but I still remember this. When I would, when I drink too much alcohol at night, even though I'm out, I feel like I got less deep sleep when I wake up in the morning. And I remember that same type of feeling from marijuana. You know, like the next day from marijuana, I experience a green day. I feel less alert. I feel less rested. I feel less able to be productive. And yeah, I'm guilty of not getting enough sleep sometimes as well. But I feel like the marijuana, it's kind of one of those excuses that we give ourselves. Like, all right, I'm gonna smoke it so I can get my good sleep in. But really, you end up, munching down a bunch of pizza and then you're foggy all the next day, right?
It's happened that way sometimes.
Sometimes it
It's a
happens.
little bit of a hangover. I mean, especially if you smoke a lot, and then go to bed, you're gonna wake up with a definite hangover. I mean, it's nothing compared to what alcohol is, but there is definitely a little bit of drag in your shit the next day, that's for sure.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about it on a more, as opposed to a personal level. Let's talk about it more on like a societal level. So a lot of people, and I'm not gonna call out a name, but so uh, we did some projects on the marijuana side, and it's not to say that we're doing marijuana stuff, cultivation, manufacturing, distribution, or retail. Uh, but a lease is a lease, and we live here in California, and you do that, right? In industrial. But I remember being asked by someone. This was maybe 3, 4 years ago, and it's super racist sounding. But it was an older lady, and so we'll let it slide. She said, "Well, Dimitri, what happens when we all start smoking a bunch of marijuana?" And the Mexicans come and they take our jobs because we're all stoned out of our minds and
Oh.
we're not productive. I know it's insane sounding, but I actually heard this and I said, first of all, I was like, what? Are you kidding me? Um, but that being said, there's still a stigma associated with it of if you smoke pot, you're lazy. Whereas if you drink alcohol, you're a totally normal person. I mean, everybody drinks, right? Even though we all know that drinking lots is bad. Uh, but if we did this show as marijuana money, I don't know how well that would go. Or maybe it would go extremely well nowadays. Uh, so what do
there
you think about the societal benefits? Do you think that we're going to get all lazy and Mexicans are going to come in and steal our jobs?
isn't it also a quantity issue? It's just the quantity of weed is just a lot smaller than the quantity of alcohol. Like the proper dose is a lot
That's true, but,
smaller.
but you can't dose out your marijuana as easily as you can with alcohol. Alcohol, 40%, whiskey, vodka, tequila, etc. The hard alcohols are 40%. And you can look at the percentage and dose yourself up appropriately. Whereas with marijuana, I mean, heck, even when I was in high school, and we didn't have the type of strong marijuana that we have today, and this wasn't even that long ago. When I was in high school, it was kind of a mixed bag. You'd smoke this stuff and you'd be a little bit high. You'd smoke this stuff, you'd get really, really, really high. But nowadays it's even crazier. I think the last time I smoked, which wasn't that long ago, just in social company, I got blitzed. Like crazy. I took one hit and I was blitzed. And I was like, dude, I'm 6'5", 200 and too many pounds. And and I got blitzed off of one rip. Um, so the question is, all right, there's the dosing is all messed up, but what's the impact? What on a grander scale? What do you think? Let's go
It's a
Hunter.
good question. That's a good question. I I definitely don't feel like there's any concern like the lady expressed about everybody getting stoned and just rolling over for whoever wants to do whatever. That's not the case. I in my history, especially in college, have been all various forms of stone and levels of stoned, and there was never a point where I was so high. If somebody said, "I'm gonna come in here and take your job or your car, even my keys, a Walkman, a phone," like I would have still stood up to that. Like there's not, and it's not my country. They're not trying to take my country. Uh, they're just trying to like steal my lighter. Even I'm like, no, 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 no. Like even at my most high, I don't feel like there's a rollover thing that goes with it.
Well, so I think so. Here's the way I broke it down. The
And
converse. Go on.
70 million gun owners in our continental U.S. So people talk about, oh, the largest army. Well, the largest amateur army is 70 million strong, and it's right here in the U.S. because it's all these guys with guns.
Well,
Uh,
that's a whole nother conversation
I
about
don't
guns.
think
I feel like we can have
I
a
don't
good
think
debate about
them
that.
a joint and take their property. I really don't think that's gonna happen.
No, no, no. Okay, so hold on. I don't think that what she was referring to was the Mexicans are going to come in and steal our property and our jobs by force. I think the implication was that the Mexicans, the foreigners, and it's really it's xenophobia, right? It's the enemy that we don't know. The enemy that we don't know is going to come in, and since we're going to have a culture that accepts getting messed up on pot, which the stigma is it's going to make you lazy, and it kind of does. It makes me lazy. It makes me lazy. I want to sit down on the couch, eat potato chips. I'm not, my most productive when I'm smoking pot. So I think what she was trying to imply was if we're smoking pot or if it's acceptable to smoke pot, will we take it too far and allow for foreigners, doesn't matter if they're Mexican or Chinese or European, it doesn't matter. What I think what she was asking is it going to make us less competitive? And by us, I mean our society,
Yeah,
America.
Well, that's more of a binary thinking. It just wouldn't that just mean that she thinks that we don't have any self-control? That you know,
yeah,
do people do people drink whole bottles of whiskey every single day just
yeah,
because we can?
yeah. If
Some
that was
days.
And there are some people who do that,
gonna be the
but
alcohol,
we have a lot of social controls to make sure that we don't just let people take our jobs. One is, peer pressure. If we're underproductive, our peers are going to get pissed at us because not all of our peers are going to be smoking pots every single day. So
Yeah.
it's just the most rudimentary controls, of society, or even just a group of people are there to prevent us from, being self-destructive unless we want to be self-destructive. In which case, there's so many different ways to do that. You could do that
yeah.
with a big bottle of scotch.
Yeah, if we were in danger of having happen what she is afraid of happening, it would have happened with alcohol, because alcohol intoxicates to a much less competent state, and there's, like Brian said, the controls. I mean, there's going to be jobs that just like now don't allow you to show up drunk. You can't operate. As a matter of fact, the only job you can legally drink on the job is a DJ. But other than that, there are literally no other jobs you can legally drink on the job. And it all comes down to, like there's people I'm sure taking a nip on the way to work. But unless it hinders their performance or their boss sees something or, you know,
Or if they get injured. Yeah.
exactly. Well, then it never comes up and it's never a problem. I think there's going to be more controls implemented, just like with alcohol. You can be pulled over and get a breathalyzer for alcohol if you're swerving. I think the same thing's going to happen with marijuana. There's going to be tests that are on the spot, like, hey, you're doing something right now that leads us to think you're under the influence of this. Let's test and verify. And if it's a job, you're fired. If you're driving, it's a ticket or arrest or whatever. But They're
So,
gonna have
so
to.
there's a good one. With alcohol, it's out of your system pretty quickly. I mean, if I drink a bunch of scotch and jump in the car and drive, you're going to be able to do a breathalyzer, right? Or a blood test. But with marijuana, it's in your system for what, like 30 days? And it's
Yep.
not on your breath. I mean, how can you say, oh, what do you smell the breath? Is there, there's no breathalyzer type of thing
You
that can,
swab the mouth. You
okay, but
could
what if
potentially swab the mouth.
so what if I smoked marijuana? What if I took a big old bong shack in the morning? Well, that's a problem anyways, but let's say someone did a big old bong shack in the morning and then now it's the evening and they're not feeling it anymore and they're going to a movie with their, significant other, they get pulled over. They're not high anymore. They were high 12 hours ago, but it's going to still be in their mouth, right?
Yeah, but they're not getting pulled over for swerving or running a red light or sitting at a green light for 3 years. Like they would be getting pulled over for speeding, and at which point they're not gonna, test unless their speech is slurred, like with alcohol. Like you have to give them a reason to think you are under the influence, and if you aren't under the influence anymore, you're gonna be doing things that appear under the influence to get prompted for a test.
Hold on.
Theoretically.
Well, so theoretically, but let me try to, since we're going down the path, and I think this is a really great thing to talk about. So let's say you're not high. Let's say you didn't even smoke pot. Have you never run a red light? Have you never sat at an intersection a little too long because you were talking to somebody or fumbling on your phone or something? Well, let's say this same situation just happened. You're not high anymore, but you did stay at a red light for a little too long just because slipped your mind. Just you're a regular person. You're not high.
Yeah. Yeah.
But you were high 12 hours ago, and they swab your mouth and they say, ah, you were high, and that's why you put people in danger. And you say, I wasn't high. So then what? Now we're in a dilemma, right?
That leads to an innovative product right there, which would be something that could clear the mouth. Like after you've smoked, like if you take a swish and like mouthwash, you like do the swish, you
But
know.
now we're in a problem for the first one.
But then you would still test. You'd probably blow on the breathalyzer if you had a mouth full of
Yeah.
mouthwash still.
Like, well, I had mouthwash, so I'm not gonna get a DUI for marijuana. Oh wait, there's alcohol in the mouthwash. Damn it, I got a DUI for alcohol.
Oh man.
Okay, so
And,
there's a dilemma there. There are
yeah,
more dilemmas.
whatever method they try to come up with for on the spot testing, because they are going to have to come up with something for on the spot testing. I've heard rumors about a light that shined into your eye and there's a certain reaction they're looking for. I think it's like a blue light and there's a refractive quality. But I guarantee they're going to come up with a way to tell whether it's recent or not. And then with that, I imagine there would probably be a whole line of products that help you with that as well, just like there are now that help people, pass, urine tests for jobs. I guarantee there'll be a market for things you
I know
can
what I do when I
take.
need to pass a urine test for a job. I say, Hunter, help me out here. No, I'm just kidding. Okay. So let me throw. So I was at a family party this weekend, and by the way, hope you guys had good Easters and such. Um, so I was at a family party this last weekend, and it came up. So one of my uncles or some sort of kind of distant family member, but it's close enough, is actually an ICE agent, and I had no idea.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, he's an ICE agent. So it's immigration and customs enforcement. And so, it's not just all immigration. He deals with customs. So he deals with the customs part. And he was telling me like he was showing me pictures and stuff. And I'm not going to name any names because I don't know if he was allowed to do so. But he was showing me all these pictures about how they're busting, several tons of cocaine and several tons of methamphetamine coming from Mexico, because we're here in Southern California. But then he was also saying, look at how much marijuana there is. And so there's a bunch of marijuana that they rounded up. But then another thing, so that's kind of coming from, Mexico, and that's been happening for a long time, and we all know about it. But one thing that he showed me that we all know about, but I don't think everybody does, is this BS that's happening here in California, where yeah, he showed me, for example, there was a lady in Los Angeles, just so I don't give it too much away. And he showed me just the picture of stacks of hundreds. And he said, oh, this is, probably a couple $1 million. And this is just what we found. She was running an illegal operation out in the desert. Mind you, it's 2019. Running an illegal operation out in the desert, has millions of dollars in cash sitting in her sweet house in Los Angeles. And he showed me a picture out her window. It's like overlooking the beach. And I was like, wow, that's a beautiful house. Illegally. So what's the incentive for people to operate legally? Because that is a unique story of it being shut down, and somehow it was connected to customs enforcement, right? But what about if ever, it's just Americans doing illegal stuff? I've heard tons of stories, and I have some of my own, uh, of people operating illegally and no enforcement here in California.
Yeah, I feel like marijuana is on the exact same path in a way that alcohol has already traveled. I mean, there was a prohibition period for alcohol. There's been a prohibition period for marijuana. Prohibition is now getting lifted in states. Eventually, I feel like it'll be federal. And just like we were talking about earlier, they will start including that on job descriptions. Like no use of this, you'll be tested for that. And I feel like there's going to be some way to control traffic as well. But I feel like everything we've done for alcohol is going to happen for weed. I feel like you're going to eventually see as many commercials for cannabis on, during the Super Bowl as you do for Budweiser and Miller and all those other companies. Like, I feel like it's just a matter of time. It'll be just as prevalent, if not more prevalent, because there's less downside.
Brian, what do you think?
I mean, I agree with the sentiments. There's not much more that I could add to that.
So I have something to add to that. Right now, in other states, like for example, we've done some stuff in Massachusetts, and in Massachusetts they uphold their laws. There's no black market in Massachusetts, because if you get caught growing illegally or manufacturing illegally or distributing or running an illegal shop, then you get put in jail, or you get some sort of fine, or depending on the scale of what you're doing, right? You're breaking the law. There's a law that is broken. It's enforced, right? Seems rational. But what I'm seeing and hearing about, seeing firsthand and then hearing about secondhand, is here in California, there are legal operators, people who are growing based on getting their permitting and their licensing and paying all the taxes and doing everything like Budweiser or like any other alcohol or cigarette or whatever, any other business has to get licensed, right? But these guys, there's this black market, and it's huge here in California, the biggest black market of any state in the country even, and possibly even the world in terms of just market size. We have such a massive population here. And you have people growing illegally, manufacturing illegally, distributing illegally, and then nothing happens. And I will go so far as to give an effing example. You guys understand this, and I'm going to say this for the whole world of our million followers that we have. Smash subscribe. Okay. Sorry. We had a building out in the desert, fully legal, everything great, that we owned, industrial building. And the tenant that we had in place was supposed to get their permits and their licenses and everything to operate legally for cultivation, manufacturing, distribution of, at the time, medical marijuana. And then this was during the switch that was happening into recreational marijuana. Totally fine. As long as you're getting permitted and it's not a liability to us as landlords, great. We want to do it. And I think a lot of people can resemble that statement. But what happened was these guys didn't get a certificate of occupancy, didn't get state licensing, didn't do a whole plethora of things. And then they go into the building. They have 600 plants in the building. Code enforcement and the marijuana task force go out, take a bunch of pictures like they're tourists of these 600 plants, go, you're operating illegally. Oh, you shouldn't do that. And then what happens? Nothing. They got a $100 fine or something ridiculous like that. And then guess what we got? Nothing. They didn't pay us rent. They didn't go through all that. And that's a civil matter that we had to deal with in a different way. But the point is, when you have 600 plants that you're growing illegally, and the police with their radios and their shotguns and the things that they're supposed to enforce stuff with, they go out and they see it, and then you look at the police and you go, ha, you suck, I win. And then the police are like, yeah, we do kind of suck, whatever. You explain that to me. Someone.
I feel like also like alcohol, there's got to be a step up in enforcement. I remember during Prohibition era, if they found a still or anything like that, they destroyed everything on site. They would stab holes in stuff, break bottle. I mean, they just destroyed on site. And I feel like once it becomes federally legal, I feel like there's going to be a task force, kind of like ATF, that is going to focus in on illegal operations. Because keep in mind, our government, I hate to say it, works for the most wealthy corporations in the country, if not the world, some of which are tobacco, some of which will be in the marijuana business at that point because it's legal. And once the lobbyists say, hey, you got to crack down on this black market competition, there's going to be a crackdown on this black market competition. I feel like it's going to be resembling.
Is there anything that would prevent these people who get harassed by the police from suing? Because the enforcement would come in, they would destroy all of the crops, and then the owners of the illegal operation would go ahead and sue the city, and they might win.
They could. Oh. It's not clearly delineated in the law that they have the legal right to do so, and that's going to take some legislative change.
Hold on. I'll answer that because unfortunately I have too much knowledge about this particular topic. Our justice system is garbage. Anyone can sue anyone over anything. Period. Sure. You don't need any reason to do it. And it usually boils down to whoever has more money will win. So for what that's worth, I will say this. In other states, we're talking about this problem being in California. In other states, it's not as big of a problem. Again, in Massachusetts, point out one situation, and Massachusetts is a much smaller market, but it's still, point out one situation where this kind of thing happened, or even an anecdotal piece of evidence. You don't hear it because it doesn't happen, because they shut down operations to the point where people said, I'm not going to do an illegal operation because it's not beneficial for me to risk my life or my livelihood to do so when I can just go get licensed. That's why people get licensed. I'll take it to this level. Let's say I wanted to run an alcohol company. Good old Dimitri's brew. Scotch brew. It's a beer scotch. Everyone's going to love it. The Dimitri's beer scotch. We start up the still right here, right there in that back corner. And you guys want to come? Let's do it. It's going to be delicious. Okay, but we're not licensed. Guess what's going to happen if I do that? I'm going to get in a lot of trouble. If I do it for my own personal use.
Yeah, only if you sell it, you'll get in trouble.
Well, and so that's the whole thing. If I do it for my own personal use, you technically can get in trouble because I'm threatening the neighbors' houses with fire hazards. But nobody's going to know, nobody's going to care, it's fine. However, if I have the equivalent of 600 marijuana plants in an industrial building without licensing, you're going to get into a lot of trouble. If and that's a significant amount of plants, by the way. So other states enforce their laws. California doesn't. And we've been told for a long time that California will enforce the law. When do you think that'll start?
Like I said, I feel like when it goes federally legal and you have the big money string pullers saying this has got to go, that's when it's going to go. It's also going to take some consolidation of the market. Once it gets to where it's leveled out a little bit from federal legalization, I feel like then the taxes will come in line. Because right now I feel like it's being overtaxed to the point where it's encouraging black market because the profitability is so much higher. And in order to get the lucrativeness away from the black market, they're going to have to, in regulation, tax less to where these larger companies can basically run the biggest, best margins possible, like they have been with everything else, with alcohol and tobacco. Like these big companies, if you try to start Dimitri's Homebrew or Brian's, pre-rolled cigarette, good luck competing with that level of company because they have so much automation, they have so much integration, they've cut every corner, whittled every business model. Like it's gonna be really hard, for someone doing it illegally at scale to either A, get away with it, and B, be tempted when they probably have the skills to get hired by a legitimate operation at some point as well. Because keep in mind, if you're able to grow like this lady nowhere, and you know how to grow all these things, and you manage this huge operation, you have skills now that Marlboro is going to find beneficial. So
Okay.
will Camel,
Here,
and so
legitimate operations just don't have enough power yet to be able to make sure that illegal operations don't exist. And once the state figures things out, and once the process is figured out, then corporations would be a lot more powerful, and they'd be able to actually lobby for the proper laws. Because, for example, up until very recently, they haven't even figured out Tier 3 yet for the licensing process. So, we have
about what Tier 3 is.
Up until very recently, they haven't even quite figured out what Tier 3 is. They were just saying, oh, you won't need a social equity applicant when you get to Tier 3. We're going to connect you with a social equity applicant, but we don't know what that is, and we don't know what that looks like.
So hold on. What is a Tier 1? What is a Tier 2? And what is a social equity applicant?
So apparently, and I'm not an expert in this, so don't quote me, but a social equity, from what I understand, a social equity applicant is somebody who has been convicted for a marijuana offense in the past. It's the state's way of saying, we're so sorry for putting you in jail and making your life shit. We're going to connect you with these marijuana entrepreneurs, and you're going to be you're going to be a co-owner of their license. So, for example, on Tier 2, the social equity applicant must own 33% of the license, must own 33% of the business, even if, just because he's there. But it allows you to get first mover advantage, because by having a social equity applicant in, regardless of whether or not they're valuable for the business, they're valuable because you get a license, a provisional license, before the actual licenses start kicking in, which would be at the end of this year. So the businesses that are in operation either were part of Tier 1.
Here in California or in general? This is here in California?
It's here in California.
wow.
Somebody say something that isn't what I want to say right now.
Are you wanting to run out and get arrested real quick so you can get equity in these operations?
Yeah, I'll be a social equity applicant. Come on, guys.
So I can get brought in.
So 33% of somebody's business has to go to somebody random who at some point got arrested for something?
It's
Even
well, in tier 3, it's somebody random that the state picks for you, and it's going to be a lower percentage on tier 3. But on tier 2, it's somebody that you pick. So you can pick a social equity applicant that you want to share 33% of your business with.
so you can pick your buddy who got arrested for smoking the ganja back in '92.
If you want to, I mean, if you want to bring him in and pitch him to your investors. Oh, here's my social equity applicant, my roommate from like 10 years ago.
My college roommate, Doug. I still owe him $20. No, so wait, hold on. But so you're yeah, pitching to investors is important, but what? There are social equity applicants that are just like rich guys now, then that they're like, "Oh, I got arrested for pot back then, and now I'm getting 33% of your business that you're investing in for nothing, but hey, look at me. I'm the social equity applicant."
Well,
That's
most
fair too.
likely, it would be a smarter choice to pick somebody who actually has expertise in cultivating marijuana.
Yeah, so I'm not going to name his name, but I know somebody who has been getting into trouble with the marijuana. He's a political guy. And if I said his name, you guys would know it too, but I'm not going to do it. Um, and he would totally be his own social equity applicant, right? That's not fair compared to what about the people that only get started in tier 3 that the state picks, Joe
Well,
Cotton from Mendocino.
and one of the alternatives is to always just come in when the rest of, when they start giving licenses to everybody. But then, you won't have a competitive advantage anymore. You won't be first to market. You won't be selling products before everybody else gets licensed.
So once they start doing that, can you buy out your social? I mean, I guess you don't know the answer to this, but presumably you could buy out your social equity applicant.
Apparently, I mean, I asked about that. I don't remember the answer exactly, but it didn't sound like that was the case.
No, I'm talking about later. Once the real licenses are given out and the provisional licenses are all done, and it's just like any other business, then you're like, hey man, I'll give you like $5,000 and a couple of rollies to get out of here.
I
Like,
don't really know. It might be against the spirit of the law.
it's a ridiculous law.
That's what I'm saying. They haven't figured things out yet. The law isn't solid yet. So until they figure things out, until the state figures out what the laws are supposed to be, then it would because just a few months ago, one of what I heard was that a tier 3 applicant won't be able to even get manufacturing. That they're not giving licenses out for manufacturing anymore, for manufacturing of for extraction of products, which doesn't make any sense. And then so at that point in time, people I knew who had manufacturing licenses were one, pretty happy, but were also freaking out, like what's going on, what if we want to expand, what's going to happen to these licenses. But then the state a few months later changed their mind, and they said, yeah, we're going to give out more manufacturing licenses. So it's just like
Who is it that's changing their minds? Is it the cannabis? So in most states, it's the Cannabis Control Commission. I know we have one of those here in California, but I know we also have the Department of Public Health and the Department of Food and Ag.
Yeah, I'm not an expert at this, but what I've heard is that one of the reasons why when you have a cannabis facility, if you have manufacturing and if you have cultivation, you have to have a divide between the two halves, where people would, as if they were two completely different buildings, because they're two completely different regulatory bodies that are managing them. So the manufacturing is managed by the DPH, I think, and the cultivation is the CCC. I'm not sure, but because of that, there's that complexity when you have completely different regulatory bodies that don't really talk to each other. Well, even if they do talk to each other, because they're separate, just by nature of being separate, your lines of communication wouldn't be very good. So
yeah, it's a bureaucracy.
It's going to be a lot slower moving forward over here, whereas in Massachusetts, everything is run by the CCC. It's just one regulatory body. You don't have they can get things done relatively quickly because they're not arguing with anybody else.
So I feel like let me say something, and then I want to hear what you think about what I'm about to say, Hunter. So a friend of mine, and again, not naming any names. I guess we have to figure out if we can name names. It doesn't matter. So in any
Yeah,
case,
no
a
risk
friend of
it.
mine
No
called
point.
me. I won't risk it. Doesn't matter how much scotch I've had. So a buddy of mine called me just the other day. It's like a week ago, maybe a week and a half ago. And he said, "Oh, hey, Dimitri, how you doing?" And we chatted like normal. And then he asked me, he said, "Hey, me and a couple of my buddies who are investors, and this guy happens to be an investor of ours. He said, we're looking to start up a distribution business here in California. So not cultivation, not manufacturing, but the distribution, taking it from those places to the retail shops." And he said, "What do you think?" Because for some reason, I'm the expert on this. I do have a fair amount of knowledge, I suppose. But he asked me what I think, and I would like to tell everybody what I think. But first, I want to hear from Hunter, and then second, I want to hear from Brian on what you would tell from your own experience. What would you tell this friend who wants to start a distribution business? Go.
Well, the richest men in the gold rush were the ones that sold the shovels. Um, that's just a natural fact. I feel like as a distributor, they're selling the shovels, and I feel like that'd be a good place to be. Logistics definitely has some holes and some opportunities. Anywhere there's trouble, there's opportunity. So I feel like there is opportunity there. Before I throw to Brian, I just want to add on whenever you finish, Brian, if you could kind of explain what tiers are and what they pertain to for people that aren't in real estate and cannabis, because we've been referring to tiers a lot, and I know we know it, but that's because we're in real estate and we deal with things zoned in cannabis
Mhm.
zones. So, but
Yeah.
yeah, that's what I would say. I'd say distribution's a good play right now.
Well, before I answer the question, I'd prefix by saying I am not an expert in cannabis. I only hear a lot of operators talking. So
Humble man. Yeah.
half of the things that they say I cannot understand. I've heard tiers being mentioned a bunch of times and issues being associated with the tier system, but I've never looked up what the definition is. So
I think that's more of like a regulatory tier.
yeah, they
There's
would
more of a
mention tier one, tier two, phase one, phase two. It doesn't, it goes over my head. Um, but that said, from if your friend was running a licensed distribution facility,
That's what he
and
wants.
he has the land to do it, and he has the smarts to do it because distribution is hard. You have to be able to curate what brands are going to work. If you're not going to be curating and you're going to be going with a long tail and you're going to be selling every single brand, then you're going to have a lot of warehouses and a lot of means to distribute all of that product. And this product isn't just going to have to be an Amazon warehouse. You're going to have security in place because this product is valuable. It's like you're storing diamonds in a warehouse. And some of this product is perishable too. So it's a refrigerated warehouse. So these are massive barriers to entry. But if you could get past the barriers of entry and you could get himself considered as the Amazon of distribution, that is a good start. But he also has to have relationships with the retailers because if he wants to keep things legit, he can't necessarily distribute to end consumers because even though we see a lot of delivery businesses around here in California, as far as I understand, delivery is technically illegal. You
Yes, it is.
can't distribute to end users. You have to go through a retail facility. So you have to have the relationships with the retail facilities. You have to have the proper channels. You have to market in a very legit and up and up way. You can't have too many colors because too many colors means that you're marketing to kids. You can't have cartoon characters because you're marketing to children and you're asking children to take the devil's lettuce. It's just
Oh man,
there's a
Puffy,
lot of
Puffy the Magic Dragon. We can't have that mascot.
maybe you can because there's a historical reference.
Yes, it's going to the Chinese children. The magic dragon that is always smoking the pot. Um, well, let me throw my 2 cents in, and then we'll wrap this thing up. This actually made me think of something that I need to I have to make a call. Um, Here's what I told him, and this is my opinion on California. Uh, it doesn't make sense to operate legally in California because there are a bunch of people doing distribution that have the relationships. And from what he told me, one of the partners of this, venture that they're talking about, has relationships. So they have the relationships, and we'll assume that they have the relationships sufficiently.
Yeah, I wouldn't try to compete with California, just because the market is saturated almost at every level. But anywhere else,
Ah.
Colorado, I would say distribution is a good play.
So that's
But you're
exactly
right, California is.
That's pretty much what I told him. I said, look, California is a mess right now. There are a bunch of people that are doing what you're talking about doing. They're doing it illegally, and they're perfectly fine doing it illegally, cutting corners. You have a lot of barriers to entry. It's expensive, it's time consuming to get licensing, to get permitting. And I know he's not the type of guy to operate illegally. So he wants to do things legally. I said, well, it doesn't make sense right now in California. And then real estate is overpriced if you want to buy a building, though technically we already have a building. Uh, but
Core was a.
hold on, that's a whole nother story. That being said, I want to wrap this up just because we're coming up on time here. It's pretty much I advise them against it. And when I say advised, I mean just as a friend talking to him, understanding the space a little bit. I'm by no means the highest expert. See what I did there? Um, but I do know a fair amount about this topic because this is what we do on the real estate side. And in order to do it on the real estate side, you have to understand the different departments, the different tiers, the regulatory tiers, hurdles that you have to overcome, and just understand what is happening in the world. And California is screwed. I'm going to leave it on that. Maybe if we want to do another one of these, let's do another one talking about, maybe some of the regulatory things happening here in California. But let's do this. Let's do final thoughts. Hunter, Brian, and then me. Final thoughts, marijuana, whether it's personal, political, business, thoughts. Go.
Um, as far as final thought goes, I I feel like the best thing I can impart to people listening that are interested in investment, because we are, after all, an investment podcast at our core. I feel like from the investment side, with the regulations taking shape right now, for instance, with our project in Massachusetts, we had some regulatory shifts happening during our process, and as a consequence, we're having to roll with the punches. But we know that these type things happen because we know where the industry is. We've had that experience in it, so we know these are just inherent growing pains. So with all of the regulatory shifting and settling that's going on right now, I would just advise, there is a lot of opportunity, there is a lot of money to be made, but if you are going to invest in the space, you definitely need to do it with someone that has been in the space and has understood the space for a while, knows how it's growing, knows how it's going, where it's going, can be a little bit predictive. Because if you're trying to invest in the space right now with no knowledge and no experience, it is very, very likely that you're going to lose your shirt, because it's the wild, wild west still. I mean, it's as far as regulations go, and as far as business goes. So that would be my final 2 cents. I would not avoid it, but I would seek out experience if you are going to play in that arena.
I agree.
Before jumping into my 2 cents, I just want to give um, a bit of information before anybody starts Googling. I made a mistake with I flipped the tier and the phase. So it's actually phase 2 phase 2 licensing, not tier 2 licensing. Tier 2 is a different thing from phase 2. Phase 2 is the one that does have a social equity applicant related to it. And if people here wants to Google that, they'd want to look for phase 2 licensing, or just phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3 licensing. And as for my last comments here, the marijuana space is really exciting. It is the Wild West, and because it's the Wild West, that's why it's exciting. You just have to dig in and dive deep, and try to create relationships with the people who do hear the news, that do understand what's going on. It's a great opportunity for people who like to build relationships because people are a lot more open and trusting now because everybody who's in the space is inherently creative. They don't know who to trust. They don't know where to go. So just dive in and see where you could help and see where you could fit in and contribute. And magic can happen.
Magic. Well, I will say this as my 2 cents, and then I'll leave it on a question. Ding, something dinged.
It was my glass.
Alarm for the hour. Oh.
That's what a time, right at 4 o'clock. All right. I'd say fall back on your structure. It is the Wild West. There's no question of that. Things are changing, regulations are changing fast. There's, especially here in California, illegal market, other places not so much, but it takes time to develop into that. However, if you have a good structure and you have flexibility in time, you will succeed. If you don't over leverage or make the silly mistakes that people make when they really don't know what they're doing in investing in general. So my 2 cents is think about your structure first. Definitely go with good operators. Test the waters. Don't throw all your eggs in one basket. And make sure you're not drinking too much scotch before you do it. So, do you guys want me to play the Scotch Money song on this piano, or should we save that for next time? I'm just kidding.
Let's save it for next time because you're at your hour mark, and I know you have an important call.
Yes. I have to run myself. Okay, guys, thank you so much for coming onto the podcast today. This is Dmitry Chabotarev. We have Hunter Slay, Brian Arandez. This is Scotch Money. Scotch Money. Scotch Money. Thanks, everybody, for joining us. We'll see you again soon.
Yeah.